Okay, I think we'll take that nice gentle musical fade out to get started. I know we have folks still getting settled and joining us, but we have so much exciting stuff to cover. So we're going to get a move on here. Thank you everyone for being here for our third virtual learning event for Delta Center, California. This one is titled Antiracism Data Equity Framework, and we have amazing guest speakers. We're so excited for you all to hear from them today. And we'll do like a quick few minutes of housekeeping first before I pass the mic. As usual, we'll ask that you please rename yourself with your team name and your pronouns, and you can do that using the little 3 dots up in the corner of your picture. We do hope that you're able to join us on video as much as possible, especially in the breakout rooms. As usual, it's so nice to be able to see everyone's faces. And make sure you're logged in on both audio and video. I think folks have that mostly figured out by now, but just a reminder, just in case. And if you missed the new Zoom person announcing it, I'll also just alert you that we are recording the presentation part of today's session. So everyone knows we are recording. And a few Delta Center, California announcements, reminders. We have our convening fast approaching in the new year, February 1st through 3rd, and you all will hear more about that from us later this week. So be on the lookout for that email. Action Period 2 worksheets are due tomorrow. You may hear some content today that inspires you to make additions or changes. Of course, those should be documents that are useful to you. So we hope that you are thinking of them that way and filling them out that way. They should be in support of your project plan. If you need more time to fill them out, please let us know. But we are hoping to see those from you coming up this week. And then as usual, we will we'll send out the evaluation link at the end. And I'll try to put into practice a little bit of what I've already learned from our speakers today and let you know what we do with it. Hopefully you know this already, but those anonymous evaluation forms the responses come back to our Delta Center California team, and we use them to make sure that we're on the right track to make tweaks to future events as needed. We don't share it outside of our team. So that's where that goes. And we hope you'll take a couple of minutes to fill that out at the end of today's session. And with that, as I mentioned, we're so excited to have these guest speakers with us today. Artrice and Tanisha will introduce themselves, but just to let you know kind of how they come to us today, we saw them do another webinar on their framework, and we were inspired and so motivated to bring their content to you. I think it will be applicable to all of our teams. It does have data in the name, and we have a couple teams whose projects are data focused. So that's what initially drew us to their framework. But as you'll see, and hopefully you've seen if you've already reviewed the framework, it is applicable to the work that we all are doing. And so hope you will all see that as you hear today's event. And to note that it's very rich. There's a lot in this framework. I think it connects nicely and complements what Karis Myrick presented and the work you all have done on engaging people with lived experience in your project. So I think this really complements and builds on that. And there will be a part 2 of this session next year. So this is not the only time we will be visiting this content. We will engage with it together in kind of an ongoing way. And this is just the start of that journey, that process. And with that, I will stop talking and pass the mic to Artrice and Tanisha. Thank you again so much for being here with us today.
Artrice, you want to go?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Is my sound okay?
You're perfect.
Okay, wonderful. Oh, I'm so happy to be here this morning to share with you something that is just really just speaks to me and resonates with me in my previous experience. I'm fortunate to be a mother and be a wife and be as a Black woman, in the world of working towards, anti-racist practices. I feel really grounded, and having 25 plus years of working in nonprofit program development, being able to kind of reevaluate and how what harms and what practices I have created and been involved in, and seeing ways that I can address that and think differently, and welcome this opportunity to share with you some of the thoughts that really spoke to me as you all work towards your program development. So thank you so much for having us here today. Tanisha?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tanisha Harrell. I am a mother. I am a singer, songwriter, poet. I'm a lover of humanity. And I'm really excited to be doing this with Artrice. And thank you for the invitation, JSI, and just really having some great conversations. So I don't want to belabor. We've got good energy going on. I don't know what your weather is like in Northern California. It's raining here in Southern California, San Diego. We need the rain. And so with the rain, I take this as I guess like a sign that, we're washing out the old and welcoming the new. And I'm looking forward to spring, but also looking forward to embracing wintering, a time to hunker down, restore, and release. And so let's do this, Artrice.
Absolutely.
Next slide.
Next slide.
Sorry, I'm just having difficulty going to the next slide.
Nope, there's grace in this
No worries.
space.
That's how, if we've learned nothing during this time.
I think I just click it now. Is that right? Okay, there we go. That's working now.
All right.
Perfect. So let's just kind of, we wanted to just, make this a welcoming experience. We love questions. If you have questions, please pop them in the chat as we're speaking. But essentially what we're going to do is provide a overview of the CIE data equity framework. We're going to spend some time delving into institutional and individual reflection. And then we're going to spend some time going over in breakout groups to be able to kind of dig into the nuances of the CIE data equity framework. And then we'll come back and we'll have a large group reflective discussion, and then closing remarks. And in the breakout group settings, that'll be an opportunity for the teams to come together and share information. And I think at this juncture, we would also like to just kind of say, like, this is not a checkoff list. It's not a blueprint, so to speak, in terms of like, if you do this, if you say this, if you say that, you'll have this outcome and result. We want you to lean in into humanity. And one of the things we like to level set, as Artrice articulated in her I am statements, having over 25 plus years experience doing community-based and nonprofit work. Artrice and I are very honest that we have created harm, some of it intentional, some of it unintentional. So we just want to kind of like level set that. And my premise tends to be that, we're all part of the problem, but yet we're all part of the solution. So we just want you all to lean into that. Artrice, do you have anything to offer?
Nope, it's right on time.
Next slide.
So when we think about how we're going to spend the next 90 minutes, a little less than that at this point, we think about our session goals, and we're going to present the landscape of data system design types, including those that center anti-racist practices. We're going to discuss challenges of developing and establishing and maintaining anti-racist data design practices. We're going to review and discuss the strategic visioning to reflect on institutional practices that do harm and transform them into anti-racist solutions. And then we're also, during this whole process, reflect on your own personal biases that you engage when you're doing this work.
And then if I'm not quite sure if it's already been displayed, but in terms of like setting our intentions, if you would be so kind, if you could provide your name, your organization, and the location that you're in, and then if you could briefly, or however you like, describe what experience you bring to this session, and what knowledge you want to bring back to your collective communities.
Next slide. We share this framework, and if that's okay, Tia, I realize that we didn't. Okay. We share this framework in the spirit of collective work and responsibility. We think this framework and accompanying a reflection tool can aid in our ability to develop programming and interventions that have more intention and less harm with those of most marginalized communities that we are trying to support. This was all created and developed with collaborative efforts from our colleagues from 211 San Diego, our colleagues from Health Leads, Dr. Rhea Boyd, and all supported by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Thank you. Next slide.
Thank you. I'm sorry. And can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Alrighty. So some of the key concepts for understanding and awareness, we want to kind of like dig into this a little bit. Just to let you all know, I'm vision impaired. And so I'm looking at my other laptop that has my amplified software. So in terms of like looking at racism, when we're talking about racism, it's in multi-layers, levels, interpersonal, structural, institution, and internalized. And so when we think about interpersonal racism, what often will, show itself or presents itself is in terms of like stereotypes, individual discrimination, and forms of prejudice. And then also looking at like institutional racism, it's advanced through our individual choices. And so, and then it also looks at, access to goods, access to services, opportunities. It becomes normative. And so internalized racism, the way that we were looking at defining that is acceptance of members of, certain stigmatized races and of negative messages. And so, and then from there, we have the concept of like do no harm. And we're recognizing that the realities of poverty, classism, racism, all the isms, past traumas, sex identity, and other socialized inequities, that institutions that practice do no harm, the hope is that we'll acknowledge it and address the real harm and things that take place as we're working with individuals. And then also, like, when you're talking about doing no harm, we're talking about like the community members that have been affected with the experience have a voice in, the creation of programs and policies that are designed to serve them. Also, in terms of like anti-racism, what we're looking to do is to lean in through our individualized and our institutionalized assessments of how we show up, is to develop, actions that respond to the systemic nature of racism. One of the things that I think is important as we, spent time like, looking at racism, calling it out, naming it, truth, acknowledgement, we recognize that harm will happen. And so when harm does happen, how you respond to that harm, how you allow people who have been impacted by that harm to have a say and a voice, and not just, basically just kind of coming and voicing a complaint, but also in a way to shift the narrative around doing no harm and what to do when that happens. And so when we're talking about anti-racism, we're talking about looking at the processes and the situations that include both unlearning and learning. We're talking about abolition, we're talking about building, we're talking about divesting, reinvesting, and essentially what I want to say to you all is that this is messy. I don't know if you guys have access to do reactions during the webinar, but I just want us to like lean into that this is something that, in essence, we've all inherited, we've all played a part in it, but it's going to take time, but part of having these conversations and these discussions is we're learning to unpack those things. Artrice, would you like to offer anything? Can I check the chat real quick, please? See, I saw some things coming in. Oh, people.
Yeah, we have folks are getting their chat icebreaker introductions in, some good I statements, and folks describing their projects and how they're hoping to apply this to their projects that are working around equity data, racial equity data.
Awesome. Do you mind if I raise a couple of those voices in the space?
How are you?
If you, yeah, sorry, if you you want me to read them or you want to have
go
folks
ahead.
speak up? Yeah, sure. Okay, let's see. We've got Samira Pingali, Community Health Center Network in Alameda County. I bring experience in collecting population level behavioral health utilization data, and I'm looking forward to learning best practices on stratifying data by race and ethnicity. We've got Catherine Tier from California Healthcare Foundation. I am a mom, daughter, Medicaid policy wonk, and I want to help co-create systems with and for the people who use them and need good data to understand that. And I'll get another one here. Eva M. Terrazas from Uplift Family Services in Campbell, San Jose, California. I'm a woman of color who led our racial equity and justice work at Uplift. I'd like to bring back new practices, ideas, conversations, policies, and data to further advance our agency and community efforts.
Thank you. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, there are a few more in there, so folks should feel free to
go right ahead. Go ahead.
To check those. Oh, should I keep going?
To have their voice
Oh,
as well.
sure. Okay. Mia Cooper, Community Health Center Network, San Leandro, California. I am a program manager for behavioral health. I hope to learn new perspectives on thinking about data that is in service to addressing behavioral health disparities in our community. Carrie, I'm sorry, Carrie, if I mispronounce your last name, Kangalosi, lifelong medical care, San Francisco East Bay area. I bring experience in integrated behavioral health. I want to bring back ideas on how to gather data on disparities in care, and especially on how to use that data to address disparities we find.
Love it, love it. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. And at this juncture, I'll turn it over to Artrice.
All right, thank you. Next slide. All right, thank you very much. So in the next couple of slides, we're going to be talking about our landscape of data system design. And so we've broken it down in a number of slides, so it's not just an overwhelming picture. So I'm going to go through each of those sections, and so giving you an opportunity to really kind of see it, and then we'll see it all together in one, I think, powerful graphic. So when we think about the landscape of system design, you really want to think about this axis. We're looking at the Y1 axis, talking about the beneficiary of the system. Who benefits most from the intervention or your program or your institution? Is it the institution who benefits the most, or is it the most impacted community? And where do they fit on that continuum? When we think about the Y2 axes, we say strategies to address harm. What are your intentions and strategy to reduce or address harm? Do you have intent? Do you create intentional harm with your practices? Do you focus on reducing harm? Is it a do no harm structure? Is it an anti-racism commitment that you've developed within your organization? When we think about the impact that your program or institution has on the most impacted community, the most oppressed community, where does that fit? Exploitation, customer agency, community autonomy. How is the community experiencing from their who have the starkest disparities benefiting from your intervention, from your program? Are the community members being exploited? Are they receiving more agency? Or are you reflecting and honoring their autonomy? Next slide. So as we look at part one of that, and then we move into part two, and we think about the type of programming that exists in our, and I have been party to a lot of developing programming that fall into these categories. And so with that said, we think about predatory. And people get very afraid of the word predatory because it seems so malicious and so evil, when sometimes it really isn't even about malice as so much as it's about lack of intention, lack of thoughtful process. So typically the predatory program development profits off a system of oppression and humans who are oppressed. So if I'm gathering your information and I am selling it at no benefit to you directly, or even without your permission, there is a predatory nature in that. Although I am not trying to be malicious, I may be using those funds to support further programming. However, I am still benefiting from your product without engaging you or acknowledging that you have any choice in the matter. When we think about passive, it observes the systems of oppression, but does nothing to interfere or to stop it. So often we find ourselves in savior design. I know for the last 20 some years, so much of my programming that I've been part of is about savior design. I am identifying what your issue is, and then without asking you if that's valid, and then I'm identifying what the solution is because it benefits what I am doing and what I can offer. And so acknowledges the systems of oppression, yet continues that oppression just by the nature of programming that we design. When we think about ally design, it confronts systems of oppression as a means of primary support the institution rather than humans are oppressed. So with our ally design, we take the time to bring in voices of the community. However, so often those are after the program has been developed, after the institution has created it, and we've asked people to come in and weigh in and give their feedback. And then we make minor tweaks based on their feedback and based on their support. Equity empowered. It dismantles the systems of oppression as a means to primarily support the humans who are oppressed. So when we think of equity empowered, we are acknowledging the power that the community already holds and that exists. And we support that. And in some cases, we take a step back, not allowing our power to overshadow what is happening and what is being developed. And then when we think of the liberatory model, which is quite at this stage, a aspirational model that I have yet to exist and live within that process. But it's something that we can all work towards because it eliminates the systems of oppression as a means of humans who have been oppressed have the power and self-determination to actually address the issues in their own community, as well as allowing us to take a step back and acknowledging the power that the community holds. But it also means really fighting the conditioning and fighting the development of the white supremacist framework that many of our programs are developed in. So we haven't quite seen that yet because it goes beyond just our programs and our institutional walls to our community in general and our society in general.
Artrice, can we pause? Right? Can we go back to that slide real quickly?
Yes.
Because I think I don't want to. This is like you laid this out wonderfully and beautifully, and I just would like us to kind of like take a pause here because I think this is like one of those tension moments that for those that are express that they want to use data to address disparities within their communities and use data in their programming and things of that nature. If in the chat, if you all can comment and just kind of like share a little bit like how this is landing on you. Does this resonate with you? Does it make sense to you? Do you see within your own programming and institutions where you might be a blend of several of these data system design types? Because as Artrice was expressing, a lot of us have been a part of the savior design and things of that nature. And so I would love, as we move forward, if people could just kind of share with us a little bit of how that landed on them. And I'll be looking at the chat box. Okay.
Thank you, too. Appreciate that. So as we look at the next slide and we bring all of these pieces together into one space where we look at the axes, we look at the program development, what you'll notice when bringing these together are two significant pieces. It's the red limiting barrier line, as well as the line that kind of pulls through these program designs. Now, I want to be really clear that that line that pulls through, that is not the continuum that you can travel. If I just work hard enough, I'm going to go from predatory to passive, and then I'll go from passive to savior. It doesn't work that way. We needed a way to be able to have a visual that wasn't all over the map and was kind of crazy to look at. We needed a visual that kind of made sense to our conditioned brains. But with that said, as T mentioned, many of our programs, different parts of the programs fall into each of these categories. And so when we talk about our reflection tool, we're thinking about what is, at the end of the day, what does your program lead with? Is it leading with a savior design? Is it leading with a passive design? And then that's how we can address that's how we can start with how do we address these issues. But I want to take a moment to look at the limiting barrier. So that red line, that really shows us what it takes to move to an equity empowered. What does it take to move to a libertarian model? It means that we need to look at what resources we need to make sure are in place. If it's policies, if it's procedures, if it's staffing, if it's funding and investment, that's what that limiting barrier. What in our offices keeps us holding back from moving to an equity empowered? And sometimes it's us, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But that is what that line represents. What you also notice is that jagged little line between allied design and equity empowered. I love to call that the Valley of Insight, because as we work on our equity empowerment and we work on our anti-racism work, so often we hit stumbling blocks. So often we hit missteps and have to go back and go forward and find that courage within ourselves to say, man, especially if we are not of a BIPOC community, where if you are from a white expressing community, so often when you hit that misstep, that fear of being called a racist, that fear of being seen as bad or evil makes you want to curl back and not have to react. And as a person in a BIPOC community, we don't have that luxury. We don't get to keep falling back when the world has thrown barbs and arrows at us. We have to keep moving forward. So that's what that insight is, that some wins, some losses, some wins, some losses. But we need to keep moving forward if we're really going to get to that winning space for all involved, and especially the most impacted and most marginalized of our community. And so, and as we see that swirly line between equity empowered and anti-racism, that goes beyond us. It goes beyond our individual power and control. That is about the advocacy of joint voices coming together to dismantling the systems that we have all been conditioned to both work, live, and love and experience. And it allows us to really think, if I'm going to make a change for the better for our community so that we don't just keep reliving the past, we have to break the mold. And that's what the libertarian model is about. It's about breaking the mold so that we live in a different experience and we don't just keep repeating the same old, and wondering, why is it not working? Why are people still in poverty? Why is there still racism? Because we haven't changed all the conditions surrounding what creates those conditions.
And Artrice, if I may share a little bit, as we have these conversations, and I'm just thinking, like, I think part of the valley of discovery part is that, I think the reality that we also have to press into a little bit is that, you know, we live in a capitalistic society, and the nuance of that with all of these different system designs to some extent is to extrapolate from people. It's and so I think like in terms of like looking at the liberatory model, I think one of the things that it may look different in each community, and that's something that is co-created, co-owned, self-governed by the impacted community. So the liberatory model, the way that I'm envisioning it more and more as we're thinking about this, is that we don't know what it looks like to a certain extent, but also what we do know is that to some extent, it's going to remove some of the power structures that exist within these other system designs.
Yeah, thanks, T. Next slide. So earlier we talked about looking at our own bias. And so you'll see many times people think, did you change the slide? It looks like the exact same slide. It is not. So this is not the same slide that I just shown you. This is the individual. This is an opportunity to do some individual reflection. And so we're going to talk about the X and Y axes in a different way at this point. So if you now look at institutions are not just brick and mortar, and I say that often, or laptops or Zoom screens. They are us. An institution is built on people staffing that institution or program, and we are either developing policy, executing on policy, or dismantling policy that doesn't work. And so this is our opportunity to look within and see what do we bring to this work that we are spending our time and talents developing and creating and pushing forward in the world. So with that said, if we look at the Y-axis this time, we're focusing on the needs, priorities, and desires of the community that we're serving, both internally and externally. Are we me-focused? Are we others focused? And in the others term, is it about the people who are within our circle, the people that we work with, the people who are our clients, the people who are our fellow colleagues and staff? Or are we most marginalized focused? People we don't even know their names or faces, but just know that they exist in the world and we're trying to make it a better place. When we think about the other Y-axis, we think about, once again, our view of power, both internally and externally. Do we not give up any of our power anytime? We hold the power because we think we know best. Do we give power to others, which in itself has a power dynamic that is unbalanced? Do we recognize that the most marginalized community has power that we don't know anything about and we're not privy to? Or do we respect and honor the most marginalized community's power? Do we see how things are done in other communities and think, boy, that is not how I would operate. However, I respect that that's how that works for them. And I need to look at that and embrace that as not different and other and bad, but as just not the way I have been conditioned, but leaving space for others to operate what works best for them and how they've been conditioned. When we think about the X-axis here, we think about the impact on the oppressed community. Are we doing exploitation of that community? Do we engage in discrimination of this community? Is it about inclusion? Is it about equity? That you are here and I am here and we're both bringing something to the table. Is it about liberation, where I'm acknowledging your autonomy and I am taking a step back that is not even about me? So it allows us to really kind of think about all of these design systems and where we fall into the mix and how we promote them, or we are a barrier. We ourselves can be the limiting barrier as we move forward. Thank you. Next slide.
Awesome. Thank you, Artrice. And so as we discussed like the data system drivers, what we initially kind of looked at is like these 11 components that, drive existing data. And essentially, you know, what we're looking at is like informed consent and refusal. We're looking at power, system design, and governance. Those are some of the things that Artrice was talking about. So these are the things that, you know, drive our data within our systems. Data stewardship and collection and use. Who owns the data? Is there expiration on the data? Is there shared collaboration in the analytics and using the data to create narratives and stories that resonate with the people that are sharing the data? What accountability and transparency is present in the data? Also looking at like security and role-based permission and access, technology, interoperability, also looking at the sustainability and the monetization, and then shared language. You know, are we using the same language that you know, the communities that we're working alongside with, that they can understand? You know, does the community understand what interoperability means and how they play a role in that? I often express when I'm in certain in spaces that I'm data, right? Your data. And so how I communicate my data may be different from how you communicate your data. So where is there like the shared language, the nuances of that? And then also looking at like outcomes, impact, advocacy, care coordination, you know, network engagement. And so these are some of the system designs and things that are within, you know, how data is used. And so just looking at, you know, this framework, and looking at the design of each of these, paying attention to how these drivers exist and what are ways that we can look at moving them towards a more anti-racist model. Artrice, do you have anything to share? Next slide, please.
No, I think that's great. I think that's great.
So now we get into, I can't see the chat. I don't know if there's any questions or anything in that space.
I'll elevate one thing that was shared earlier. Jacqueline says, the struggle can be that all of the systems don't move into adjustment at the same time. Data often lags behind the design ideas, even with the best intentions. And I think that connected to what you were saying before, that, you know, some pieces of the program might be in different places, but I wanted to elevate that comment.
Absolutely, absolutely. And keep in mind, you know, and I know that Tia will speak to this, this is not, you know, and she said this already, this is not a blueprint, and it's also not a report card. As we go through this process, it's not about making folks feel like, oh my God, you're failing the community. Like, it's not that at all. This is an opportunity to really look at and assess, where are you and where you want to go? You know, I use and people who've been part of the conversation before have heard me say this, you know, how do you get to New Jersey if you don't know you're in California? You know, you really need to know where you are and what you have available to then plot out your plan, your strategic, you know, path. And that's what we're trying to do. We're giving you a tool, an opportunity to really allow yourselves and your programs to kind of look at, well, this is what we thought we wanted to do, but are we really doing that? And if we're not, do we want to change that? If not, okay. But if we do, then let's kind of plot that out and make sure that we're being clear about that. And I think all of you who have this opportunity to come together as, you know, the Delta Center folks coming together, really reassessing your programs, really developing your programs and making them stronger, it's a great opportunity to really kind of add another tool to this work and say, okay, let's make sure that we are, you know, on the path that we really wish to go and that we have intention.
Yes, I think it's really important, as you were expressing, Artrice, I often think of, like, you know, how you take those personality assessment tests, and sometimes we have, you know, humanly in us, we answer in a way of who we desire to be or where we desire to aspire to be. And so this is just a really cool opportunity to kind of like just be honest, you know, where you're at and you know, both institutionally and individually. And it's not to beat yourself up, but we can't really move forward until we have acknowledgement and truth go hand in hand. Next slide. Alrighty, so we kind of like teed this up a little bit as we're talking about the framework that we're setting. We're really talking about, so to speak, like a mindset. And so I think, like, you know, we've all kind of been operationalized to like create these best practices. And if Artrice has this wonderful model in the Bay Area, you know, serving, you know, I'm going to call it underestimated populations. As we talk about language, I'm often like looking at how we use language. Coming up in the 80s, you know, Black and brown individuals that came into the juvenile system were called juvenile delinquents, and things of that nature. And so just kind of like, even as we're like sharing the information, we have to be mindful that, and this plays into mindset, like as you're communicating, oftentimes how this lands on you, right? And so what we're looking and hoping to do, and we're holding ourselves accountable, we're you know, continually pressing and observing and holding ourselves accountable. I hope that we're conveying humbly that we by no means have arrived. It is, I like to look at this as a continuum. The more that we engage larger communities, we learn more. And so it's just, what we're looking at is a way to help facilitate conversation with key stakeholders, investors, partners, your community. And then just like looking at, you know, how your systems are designed and who they're designed to work with. And having a pause that you may start a program design where you recognize this is not working for the community. We don't have the trust of the community. Like, and so you might have to like scale back. I think one of the key things that I find in challenging this mindset is that it's not what do you call that, cookie baked, like ready-made, you know, just go to the store, grab it and pop it in the oven. And, you know, every organization has different paths of how they move forward. And so as you know, think about the prospective systems that you're a part of, you know, some may require breaking down and rebuilding much of your current systems, and that can be very alarming. That could be very distressing, especially to those individuals that are, you know, in the executive level, like, wait a minute, what do you mean? We've been doing it this way for, you know, why are you telling me we have to, you know, go back and do this a different way? And I'd like to challenge all of us, wherever we sit in leadership or power, what have you. One of the things that we see is that trust is not so readily given anymore to us. Gone is a generation where we don't question. Gone is a generation where, you know, individuals don't have access to information to be able to extrapolate and define it on their own. And so I think this is an opportunity to kind of look at this as a starting point. It can be leveraged and examined in institutions within our society. And, you know, it's our hope, we're envisioning democratization in all of our systems. And so, and community care and liberation and, you know, from systems of oppression. And we often use, you know, terminology like lived experience. Everyone has lived experience to some extent. And so what we're looking at is to just kind of better understand, you know, the designs that we have within our programs and within our institutions and our organizations. And then, you know, looking at, you know, some of the drivers that may potentially cause harm, or, you know, rebuilding robust data. And so that's just kind of like what we want to kind of say. It's kind of like level set our mindset that we're all in this together. And so as we move into our next part of the session, Artrice, I see are you thinking?
Yeah, I am, because you've said this in the past, and I just love it because I think it really speaks to the current state of program development. Gone are the days that if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
And so when you said that, it just so resonated with me in the past when you've said that, because that's true. You know, we've all lived that if you build it, they will come. We'll worry about it like when they get here. But that's not the case. We all have been in program development where you've built something and you spent your blood, sweat, and tears over it. And they haven't come and they haven't utilized it and they don't see the value in it. And so we need to do something different. So we're not taking those valuable resources that of your time and talent and energy and having them go nowhere.
Yeah.
But the difference is bringing folks into the design and co-designing makes if they own it, they will come.
Come on.
Yeah. I think that's how if they own it, they will come.
Yeah.
And so that is why we need to be thinking about our mindset these days.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true because, you know, you often hear like we can't get, you know, eligibility and enrollment, and we have this evidence-based data from 1995. Listen, I'm not coming for evidence-based data.
Or 1995.
Or 19. But I'm just saying, like, there's so many assumptions that we make about the people that we're helping, right? And I have a consensus organizing, community organizing background. And so, you know, we often say those that are impacted by the problem have the solutions, but how much time do we create for them to be able to express that and build it, own it, and then there's no need to come because, you know, there's agency and there's power in that, and they know who in the community needs so-and-so. You know, we all know that person in the community that, you know, has this expertise, and everybody goes to, you know, Mrs. Jacobs or, you know, Bruno or whomever, because everybody knows they got the juice, right? And so I think like gone are the days where we are the experts because we have access to all this research and, you know, we have the money and things of that nature. Those days are gone. We have to build together. And we understand that not every aspect of a proposal or project design will, you know, allow you the opportunity to co-design and co-partner with the communities that you're trying to serve. But I would say if you didn't start with it, at some point, you want to build that in and have it on a continuum so that people don't feel like you're just coming to them to get money that they can't benefit from. Next slide. Are there any information in the chat that we need to raise up?
No, I think everyone's taking it in.
Does everyone have actions to have reactions available to them in the webinar?
Yes, they should.
Awesome. I would love to see how this is, because we're kind of like talking and just kind of like seeing where folks at. Thumbs up, thumbs down. We don't get our feelings hurt. So. Is this helpful?
Yeah. Take what you need, leave what you don't.
Exactly.
Are you able to see everyone? I'm seeing lots of thumbs up, some applause, some hearts.
Awesome. Okay.
All right, perfect.
Is this me or is this you?
Oh, you are. This is you.
Oh, strategic visioning. So this is where we're going to get ready to go into the breakout rooms. And so when we're talking about strategic visioning, we're kind of like going before the slides, but you guys will all get access to these slides. When we're talking about strategic visioning, it's kind of some of the things that we were discussing earlier, is to really see things how they really are, not what you aspire to. It's understanding how you're operationalizing and perpetuating harm. And it's also, you know, an opportunity for you to state what you intend to accomplish through your actions, make a commitment to what you want the journey to be about as you move forward. And then this is an opportunity for you like to be in the moment. So what we're going to kind of do is have an interaction point. I'm not quite sure. We're going to break you out into breakout groups. Artrice is going to facilitate one. I'm going to facilitate one. And we're going to all be addressing the same questions. So this is an opportunity for us to kind of do some of that individualized assessment. and then kind of like walk through it a little bit. We understand that there may possibly be individuals who may be like with maybe their supervisor or their VP or what have you. So we really want to offer up, you know, trust in this space, and also just for the freedom and the liberty for people to be able to express as honestly as possible. And then we're also going to ask for someone to be our scribe and someone to keep time. I believe we have about 15 minutes for this space.
Yeah, as we go into the time, it's so funny how much time it takes.
I know, just
conversation. Like, I'm like, oh, all right, it's 11:50. So yeah, so we should probably just take 15 minutes. Then it allows us some time for some rich conversation as a whole group.
yes. And then I would just like to say, you know, if you're in a, you know, are we going to randomly assign folks?
Yes.
Awesome. You ready
So
to do it?
again, we'll need a scribe and we'll need someone to report out, and they could be the same person, obviously.
Yes.
And then someone to keep time. So